What is the guarantee that a government that comes later will not use this citizen data for profiling of citizens? How do you protect that?
So there are two things here. One is that there are three pieces here that I'll use to respond to this. One is that there is a national data governance framework policy that has been now announced, which essentially means all of government will deal with data of citizens and data management, data processing in a completely harmonized manner with the same standards, with the same guidelines, with the same rules for cybersecurity, protection, all of that. So number one. So therefore, the government will now start conducting itself not as MeitY differently, Labor Ministry differently. They will all basically work of the same playbook. Point number one. Point number two, as I said to you, the legal obligation of any entity to protect the data of the Indian citizen is intact regardless of whether it is the government or the private sector. So, like I said, third is these legal obligations remain intact whether this government is there or some other government is there or this IT minister is there or some other IT minister is there. These are rights that are being given to the individual citizen via a law. So if you look at the law and if you read the law is so elegantly drafted. It is drafted with a view to make sure that you don't need a lawyer to understand the law. Because it says one section which says rights of the data principles. Those rights are now legally enshrined and legally granted to an Indian citizen. The second says obligations of the data fiduciaries, which means these are the reciprocal obligations that a data fiduciary that deals with the data principle have to follow. This is permanent. This is Parliament enacted, and unless the Parliament in some future date decides let's dilute it, this is intact. So therefore, this is institutional stuff. This is basic fundamental architecture design stuff, which will be something that will be making an impact on our digital economy and digital ecosystem permanently. Subject, of course, amendments in the future and so on and so forth. The other thing that we have done to make sure that this will continue to evolve and grow and expand is that we have given many things as subordinate legislation and rules. So if the assumptions that we have today about the digital economy or the data ecosystem changes dramatically with, let's say, with AI tomorrow, you don't need to go back and reenact a law after 6 months and then get behind the curve again. You can then come up with subordinate legislation, take it to Parliament, place it in Parliament and deal with that challenge or deal with the opportunity at that point. So to answer your question, this is fundamental structural legislation that has a life way beyond government. This has very little administrative discretion built into the law, and therefore this is the law that will work because the law grants the citizens the rights that are now firmly embedded as part of the law when the law is passed, of course, not.
I'm sorry to be persistent in the subject, but I got the fact that fiduciaries have obligations, there will be stiff penalties on them, and governments, this law will transcend governments and other things. But what prevents a government from, a future government, for example, from using citizenship data for its own purposes, for its party purposes, or for other?
Because it's forbidden under law. If the law says, and the reason, and I missed this third point, which is that the law now says that you can only collect data from the citizen that is required. There's called purpose limitation and data limitation. I can't come to you as a private party or a government and say, give me your entire horoscope because I'm going to deliver biryani to your house. I mean, if I was Zomato or Swiggy or anybody, I will certainly be restricted to collecting only that data that is required for me to fulfill the service of the product that you are asking of me. So the principles of purpose limitation and data limitation. Data limitation means you can only collect the data that is absolutely essential for your service. Purpose limitation is that you can only use that data for the purposes that you have sought it for. These are firmly embedded as a design of the bill. The third is that once you deliver that service, once you complete, you have to delete that data. And it is granted right under the law that any citizen who says, I want my data to be erased by the data fiduciary, that power is there omnibus at any point let us assume for a minute, going by your own conspiracy theory, that tomorrow there is going to be this government that is going to come that is fraught with all the risk. You can certainly say, I want to delete all my data from the fiduciaries that are collecting my data.